Thank you.
Hey, thank you for that, Sarah. And I'm going to ask all of you here to keep me out of jail. Because the last words, among the last words Lynne said was, "Don't miss a meeting because of me." And while you're overthrowing the government, do something for the political prisoners. Not just organize, but do something to ameliorate their suffering. And so before this meeting, we wrote out 3 checks. $350 for the Jericho movement, $350 for the International Action Center, who's fighting for everything, and $350 to the anarchist movement, because they've been fighting for a long time. And so we got to clear those checks, because I don't want to go to jail for passing bad checks. And so Mimi Rosenberg is going to give us a few words of fundraising.
Now, this isn't about giving you a few words. Give me my checkbook, because that's the first thing we do. We have an obligation to support our own as many times as we're... Don't take the bucket yet.
Not yet, okay.
We gotta get something in there because it generates more energy and activity. There is nobody here that doesn't have some of those dead prez in their pockets. Nobody here. But I'm gonna start opening up by saying that aside from the incredible work of people like Ann Lamb and virtually everybody here, collectively, we need to make sure this bucket is full. I'm going to open it up with a $100 check myself to the things, and I'd like to see who here is going to match that or do better for the sacrifices of our comrades. Scream it out. Who do we make that? That's a very good question.
Lynne Stewart Organization. And understand something. We don't spend a penny of that money for personal or for anything expenses. This money is for political prisoners. As a matter of fact, a couple weeks ago I was short, so I said to Betty, could I borrow some money from the Lynne Stewart Defense Fund? And she says, no way, get it someplace else. And so we're serious. We have to raise money for our political prisoners. And what we raise goes to political prisoners. And we've been doing this for years. While Lynne was incarcerated, after she got out, we're continuing the struggle. We're following her words. We are going to keep her presente by doing what she's asked us to do.
And this is, actually, if you could lower it, just lower it a little. This is for the families in emergencies. This is for the commissary. This is for the flyer printing. This is for all the accoutrement of what it takes to publicize, to uplift our political prisoners. So here's what we're going to do. We don't need no mic. We're going to go around and people are going to talk about, we're starting with the $500 range. Who can do that? And when you give something, say something about why you're doing it and supporting political prisoners. I know we have some folks out there who are going to do this.
And a pledge is as good as a check. Let's hear it.
So, okay, I think we got it going back there. So tell me something. Why you contributed? Say it loud. Okay, we're going to do a pledge making out to the Lynne Stewart Committee. Okay. See, the people, some
What?
who suffered the most are giving the most. So let's see who else. And if you can't do the 500, that's okay. That's okay. You can do it 100.
Okay, stand up and say it.
Make a bigger contribution. Come on, get rid of those ugly dead prez. We don't need them. Our comrades need them behind the walls. Their families need them. All right, whatever you can give. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but who else? Okay, we got another contribution.
Thank you. Thank you.
By the way, what about a little of your inspiration? Why are you giving money additionally to support our political prisoners? Say why.
Most of what has been said already, I'm in solidarity with, and I love Lynne, and I big support of all the folks right now.
Complete support of the political prisoners. Sally, why did you just, Sally O'Brien, why did you add something to the bucket? Because it's necessary. All right. We will. Sharon Salon, thank you. We want to encourage, we know that people keep all kinds of movements alive. We know that it's critical to commit to Puerto Rico now, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Indeed, our sisters and brothers in Houston who are not being held by FEMA, Florida, etc. So anything that people can give is fine. Oh, wait a minute, we got the youth contingent here. Now, why are you giving this incredible donation?
My girl was in prison. She got so much support. Now to show
Wait a minute, folks, excuse me. Let's listen to the young sister.
Because when my girl was
Come down here, Mimi.
All right, let's go down there. Hey, we got to do this.
because when my grandma was in prison, everyone gave her so much support, and I just want to give everybody the same support that you guys gave us.
Tell them who you are.
Just another pledge here. This was a surprise grant to the International Action Center for $350. I didn't know we were getting that, so I'm going to turn it right back around because what goes around comes around, and we're putting that $350 back into the lynnstewart.org. And thank you.
If you're going to do that, on behalf of BAI, even if they don't know it, we're putting another $150 in to support our political prisoners and the program that's going to be created on political prisoners, which we're going to make happen. Who else wants to, so what we're going to do now, we're going to circulate this red basket. Red is the color of choice. And all of you, thank you. Give what you can, and we're shortly going to be moving into our next panel, so the best is yet to come. So thank you, sisters and brothers. Come on, empty those dead prayers from your pocket. Let's start from, always start from the left and work our way forward. Thank you all. Please do contribute. There's no one that needs it more than people who have made the sacrifices for our community. Thank you.
The next panel will begin immediately, and following that, if there's anyone here, we will show film of Lynne Stewart. Our technical difficulties have been overcome, and we will see the film that we're working to produce on the life of Lynne Stewart. And as you go outside, as you go by the table, there are books there. I see Sekou picking up his book, and if you'll hand it to me.
Yeah, I'll hold the basket. You hold up the book.
Look for Me in the Whirlwind. It's including the collective autobiography of the New York 21, 1971. Sekou Odinga, Daruba bin Wahad, Shaba and Jamal Joseph, and many others. And so pick this up as you go out. and it will further forward the movement by helping those who made the movement. Sekou.
So we want to ask people for the next panel to begin to migrate down here. Daniel, Bob.
All right, we're going to do the film first. We're ready for the film. We can't stay up here because the film takes up. Then let's skip the panel because we got words.
We will get justice. Thank you. By the way,
I'm going to we're going to do the panel.
well,
Let's do the panel. Those on the panel, please come forward. I've been asked.
Danielle. Okay. Sarah is there. Ralph Pointer is there, so give me this bucket, and I will take over this responsibility.
Okie doke.
And you will situate yourself, and we may be able to get Charles Barron on the line. We'll see.
Okie doke.
Okay?
And am I introducing this panel?
Huh? No, you're on the panel.
Who's introducing?
Me. So you're on the panel.
Okie doke. I give the.
Where is she?
Is Leola in the house? No, I think she is gone. And so, say, Betty, Betty, count the money while Mimi does the honors here.
Okay. Yes. Okay, I think we. Always for the musicians. Russell and brother Edwin. Thank you, thank you. I didn't know you were practicing that much. Give them a hand, really. They're terrific. I see Daniel. Okay. Yeah. Changing our mind. No, we're just dialectical. We're fluid. We're. By the way, you know, it's always a good idea, given the fact that we have thinned our ranks a little bit, if people want to move up. It creates a kind of greater intimacy and is often more stimulating to the speakers, too. It's your prerogative, but you're all invited to come a little bit closer, and that's what we do as family. So without further ado, the person that I have the privilege of announcing now, Danielle is a social justice activist and anarchist from Far Rockaway, Queens. He was charged in 2005 with 15 counts of arson, property destruction, and conspiracy, all related to two actions in Oregon in 2000 claimed by the Underground Earth Liberation Front, the ELF. Daniel was facing a minimum of life in prison if convicted when he accepted a non-cooperation plea agreement. He received a 7-year sentence and did most of it in 2 experimental communication management units. I could find other ways to describe them. Within a year of arriving at CMU, Daniel, with the help of the Center for Constitutional Rights and the Bureau of Prisons, with the intention of closing the unit. His arrest was part of what the U.S. government dubbed Operation Backfire, a coordinated multi-state sweep of activists by the federal government who charged them with politically every earth and animal liberation action in the Pacific Northwest left unsolved. Many have considered this roundup indicative of the government's Green Scare focus, which had activists being arrested and threatened with life in prison. Many of the charges, including Danielle's, were for incidences whose statute of limitations were about to expire. There's so much more, but Daniel can say it. Daniel is one of our heroic representatives who has committed himself to the issues of the earth and its survival, and thus our people. And it is with great honors and pleasures that he graces our stage tonight. Danielle, thank you so much for being here.
Hi there, everybody that's still here. Thanks for staying. I was really happy when I was invited to this because I love Lynne Stewart and I really miss her. She was incredibly supportive of me throughout my activist career, and especially when I was facing charges. And people would tell me that she would come to my benefits in my absence. She came to my getting off probation party last year, which was really amazing. So thank you for having me, Betty and Ralph. I was hoping to go maybe not first because I have a somewhat contrary opinion to this topic. The topic being putting political prisoners on the national agenda. It's not that I think that political prisoners shouldn't be paid attention to nationally or otherwise, but in the last 5 years since I've been out of prison, I've noticed that a lot of the work that's been done, a lot of the people that have been released due to sort of, I don't want to say local campaigns, but a lot of the work is regional. So while there has been some really major campaigns like the clemency campaign for Oscar Lopez and Chelsea Manning, a lot of it is happening in states in which there's some really hard-working organizations and a combination of support, court moves, and legal maneuvering and pressure on politicians and the courts to release people. I think you can look in the last couple of years, the Cuba Five, Zolo Azania, Sekou Kambui, Sekou Odinga, Eddie Conway, and like I said, Oscar Lopez and Chelsea Manning as examples of campaigns that people have worked on for many, many years. And finally they're, through either a combination of the courts, law changes, or successful campaigns, they're free. So if you look at I know that people were saying there's more than 100 political prisoners. I remember when I got involved in 1996 or so, there was a poster, it used to say over 115 political prisoners. Well, consulted some of the websites today, and the Jericho website, for instance, has about 44 people listed, and the New York City Anarchist Black Cross has about 50. And that's to say that many people have passed away, many people have come home. But if you look at these people, we have clusters of them. We have clusters in New York, Pennsylvania, California, and then really we have like one person in many different states. So when I think about how I want to put my time, it's not towards working on creating national platforms, it's not towards reaching out necessarily to federal politicians, especially this current administration, but it's more putting work into specific areas, because prisoners in different states will share certain attributes, let's say the law, legal situations, or the same parole. So I think for me, I've been putting a lot of energy into New York. Obviously I'm from here, I live here now. But also I think there's really excellent organizations in Pennsylvania that are doing excellent work. The Abolitionist Law Center is one of them. Those are the people that are representing, in part, Mumia on the hepatitis C suit, represented Russell Maroon Schultz on his solitary suit, and won a very nice settlement, as well as him obviously getting out of the SHU after over 25 years. So I think that because we're talking about around 40 people that are mostly over age 60, have been in prison for almost as long as I've been alive. I'm 43. a lot of the people we're talking about have been in for 35 to 40 years. I don't really have the patience or time to work on a national solution because people will literally be dying in that meantime. I think that we find places where the work that we put into it, and the work I'm talking about, is unglamorous. It's not fun. I send out a lot of emails for asking people for money to pay for Article 78 lawsuits, to pay for lawyers and filing fees. I think there's work to be done in some of the states that I mentioned to help people get out through whatever path exists for them. So in New York State, that often revolves around parole, and it revolves around perhaps compassionate release or clemency. But for the most part, it's parole. And like Ann said, 3 of the New York State political prisoners are coming up for parole right now. Herman Bell, Jaleel Muttaqim, Seth Hayes. David Gilbert is unfortunately not parole eligible, nor is Joy Powell, I believe. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. I don't see it on the national level. I see it on the state and the regional level. I think that getting people better lawyers, getting people representation with the parole preparation project in New York has resulted in people coming home, people that have done 35 plus years. Maliki Shakur Lateen came home last year. He's successfully represented by a parole prep team. And I think in Pennsylvania, there's a lot going on, especially with this. I don't have any faith in politicians, but this new DA seems to be signaling a change in Philly in terms of like looking at past convictions perhaps like Move and other cases. So finally, I just want to say, I just got good news today that we got these calendars that I work on back from the printer. It's called Certain Days, Freedom for Political Prisoners. It's in its 17th year. It's a beautiful calendar. It's got great art and artwork by people on the outside, political prisoners, social prisoners. It is a fundraiser. This year, the money is going towards release aging people in prison and Adamir. It's a Palestinian political prisoner organization. And in past years, we funded all kinds of different groups. So I have these wonderful postcards. You can get one from me. The calendars will be in New York in like 2 weeks. And thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. I was supposed to announce this. Leonard Peltier birthday party, Saturday, October 14th, 2 to 5. At Hollywood Church in 179th Street, New York. This is sponsored by New York City Free Peltier. Oh, I'm sorry. October 14th, Saturday from 2 to 5. Thank you.
Daniel McGowan, thank you for your sacrifice and commitment. And again, ongoing work. And by the way, the church that the Peltier activity is going to be in is also the church where we have another kind of political prisoner. We have a young sister who's there, who Father Barrios is trying to prevent from being deported, because we have a whole new additional round of people who, one, they would like to criminalize our Muslim sisters and brothers, and people from Latin America and so on who are faced with the terrifying deportations. And just be clear that in January, the temporary status for the Haitian people who came here predominantly after the earthquake is up. And their status is up. So along with the DACA youth, we have to deal with from El Salvador, from Guatemala, and the Haitian population who may be rounded up in one fell swoop and incarcerated and with little fanfare deported. So those are our political prisoners too. And when you go to that church, you can find out more about it, since they are a sanctuary church preventing a sister from now being deported who has a deportation order. So thanks for mentioning that, Peltier. The next person, I don't know, why am I reading anything about this person? Bob Lederer has been somebody that I've known for a remarkably long period of time now. And one of the things that I have to say is, like with Sister Ann Lamb, there are some people who, when they set their sights to doing something, there's nothing frivolous about it. It's not a momentary thing. It's their life commitment, day in and day out. And when it comes to even a personal sacrifice, there's another level of political prisoner. Those are people who were grand jury resistors, who refused to cooperate with the government towards the indictment and harassment and incarceration of their sisters and brothers. And that is Bob Lederer, who spent several months inside as a grand jury resistor and is one of those dogged researchers, writers, unrelenting people, who also is a comrade at WBAI, who particularly focuses on health-based issues. And it is a pleasure and an honor to bring you, and I should say, of course, that maybe I'm not supposed to do this, but Bob has been an activist in the gay rights community for so very long with ACT UP, etc., and is working on a book which will deal with the LGBTQ community behind the walls, etc., which is an incredibly important contribution to understanding that aspect of the struggle of those comrades. So thank you for that, and Bob Lederer, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Mimi, for that kind introduction, and really great thanks to Sister Betty and thanks especially to Sister Betty and Brother Ralph for inviting me here. I just wanted to take off from a comment that actually the quote that Anne read from the late Sister Safia Bukhari about the critical importance of having an organizing strategy, an effective organizing strategy to free our political prisoners. And, you know, Daniel reeled off a few of the recent victories in the last few years of prisoners who've come home, political prisoners, because of different forms of effective organizing. And we can't emphasize enough, and we can't restate enough what these victories have been. We have to constantly remind ourselves, and I would add a few others that I've had the privilege to be a part of in one way or another over the last 3 decades. First and foremost, for all of you here tonight, of course, is the incredible campaign led by Ralph and Betty that produced the freedom of Lynne Stewart. That was a real model of persistence and struggle. And of course, we all rejoiced at the freedom of Oscar Lopez Rivera in January, but let's also remember that that was just the 4th campaign that succeeded in freeing Puerto Rican political prisoners over the last 60 years, starting with the man who was convicted of attempting to assassinate President Truman, Oscar Collazo, who was sentenced to death. And the campaign to get him life in prison, to commute that sentence, was so powerful that even the man who was the target of assassination was forced to grant a commutation to life in prison. And of course, we know that then 30 years later, President Jimmy Carter was forced, after 29 years of imprisonment of Oscar Collazo, to free him altogether. So we could go on and on giving this glorious history of Puerto Rican freedom fighters successfully organizing nationally and internationally to free their comrades. Let's remember the recent victories with Mumia. That's very important to understand that getting him off death row in 2011 was no small feat. And that was all due to the movement, of course, supplemented by good legal work, but it was really the people in the streets that did it. And getting him hepatitis C treatment, which he is now apparently cured of that disease, and now on a possible path to a new trial. So those are just some of the many victories, and let's also not forget winning the release from solitary confinement after 23 years of Russell Maroon Shoatz, another former Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army fighter. So what are some of the lessons of all these campaigns and some of the ones that Daniel mentioned? And Daniel put out some really important strategies that we should attend to. Well, first is strategic grassroots organizing, building the broadest possible base of support. And there's a lot of ways to do this. I'll just reel off a few that I've seen work. One is to go to individuals and sectors that the political prisoner and her or his family have ties to. Make it personal, make the connections there. Go to organizations representing the populations that the prisoner is part of. That could be women, it could be LGBTQ community, it could be a particular professional group, as with Lynne's case, lawyers played an important role, et cetera, et cetera. Use your imagination. bring in progressive religious forces. They've been really key in Christian, Muslim, Jewish sectors in bringing pressure to bear. And also unions in some cases are a voice that we can't forget. They've been outspoken when brought in. There are elected officials, particularly on the liberal side, that can be put under a lot of heat to do the right thing, and that can play an important role. And let's really remember to build those connections with the organizations, the radical organizations out there in the streets that are fighting for the issues that animate people in struggle today, that may not have on their agenda the freedom of political prisoners, but that need to, and that need to be educated and brought into this broad front. And so I think that's really a key connection that we don't make as often as we should, which is that every one of our political prisoners, which, as Mimi Rosenberg said, are leaders in their struggles, they were part of a struggle to accomplish some concrete social change. And so the movements for those changes need to be brought in, and not just those movements, whether it's the Black Liberation Struggle, Puerto Rican independence, or the environmental movement, or whatever the case may be, but also the sister and brother movements that are all working against the same capitalist system, but from a different perspective. So let's make those connections. In the unfortunately growing number of cases where the political prisoner is being medically mistreated or neglected, we need to mobilize health workers and physicians and get them to speak out. An important way to broaden the front is not to insist on full agreement with the politics that led the person to become a political prisoner. Sometimes there are people who will rally, and many times people will rally behind someone's human rights, whether they agree with their specific tactical politics or not. And a crucial part is intergenerational support. I think too often we look at the people who are contemporaries of those political prisoners who are older and remember those movements in the 60s and 70s, and as important and crucial as those fighters are and continue to be, there's 3 generations since then that have engaged in all kinds of important struggles that we can connect with. And one way to do that, besides going out and doing outreach to them, is also to show solidarity and support for the more contemporary generation of political prisoners who are much younger. People like Daniel and the environmental and animal rights militant movements, and also even the ones that we are now seeing in our midst, and we're going to see a lot more of these, which are the water protectors from Standing Rock. Hundreds of them are still facing felony charges. And then the anti-inaugural protesters who are facing very serious and outrageous charges. So let's build those connections as well. And another important element is that the lawyers that come to support of political prisoners, who play a crucial role and are often very self-sacrificing, we need to emphasize and push for the respect for the strategy of the political prisoners themselves. That is what needs to take priority. And as part of the flip side of bringing in lawyers and holding them accountable is also to raise money for them, because they have to make a living and go on with their professional lives while they're doing this important work. Tactical flexibility is really critical, and one thing that can make a big difference is a sign-on letter with prominent organizations and individuals. And so we need to always be kind of thinking of ways to broaden the struggle. Mimi made a very important point about media. We have to be more sophisticated in our media strategy and use every tool available, from audio and visual. Video is becoming an absolutely crucial tool, short videos, social media, and the like. And conversely, not overuse media, not hold a press conference when we really don't think many media are likely to show up. So be judicious in that way. Keep a steady information flow going to the supporters, including legal updates in lay language, so that people are kept engaged and really up to speed on what's happening. And a really crucial thing is humanizing the political prisoner. Get their voice out to the public Get them to record, if it's possible, record their phone calls, have them write messages, tell personal stories about what is behind their commitment and their life of struggle. And persistence is absolutely key, as we've seen in every one of these campaigns, and certainly Ralph and Betty are paramount examples of the power of persistence. And on the other hand, don't exhaust supporters with too frequent mobilizations, because we have to pace ourselves for the marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as the saying goes. And the last point, I would say, is emanate optimism. We can win and we will win. And so with that, I would just encourage you to take the flyer out in the front desk that was written by one of our illustrious and committed long-term fighters for political prisoners on the legal and activist front, Joan Gibbs. It's called 10 Things You Can Do for the Freedom of Political Prisoners, and there's a lot of really good advice there. So, free them all, free all political prisoners.
Bob Lederer, as I said, he's dogged, unrelenting. We will not give up. I also just would be wrong to say, when's the last time you saw somebody from the prosecutorial end of things go to prison after they've withheld information at trials, after they've corrupted evidence? What in the world happened with, of course, Daruba Ben Wahad and all these things? All the COINTELPRO collaborated and cooperated with a corrupt court system and prosecutorial apparatus. And it's long overdue to realize that the constitutional right to counsel in the criminal venue, Gideon has slipped for 50 years now. And we really have to do some more analysis and hold the prosecutors and hold the court systems and the parole system, which is one of the most corrupt systems. It is essentially a patriarchal system that is beholden to the worst kinds of political cronyism. Those are some of the things that, on a broader level, for every single one of our political prisoners, that we have to deal with. So I appreciate the kind of keep it local and think national, but we really have to look more specifically at tackling the court system. So I could also read, but that would keep us here most of the night, about my sister Sarah Flounders. And I suppose I should read some of the fundamental things, but there's a couple of little things that I have to say. First of all, I'm sorry, Danielle, I'm sorry, Bob, you ain't in Wikipedia. Sarah Flounders is one of the only ones I know. She is actually in Wikipedia. That says something about the volume of work that she's been involved in. And it was terrifying. As you go to Wikipedia, there's 10 pages there. So I'm going to arbitrarily pick, okay, what has she done? Secretariat of Workers' World Party. Okay, she writes for a Workers' World newspaper, or what else? Organized delegations to Iraq during the years when international sanctions were in place following the 1991 Gulf War. She participated in demonstrations against U.S. presence in the Philippines and South Korea. She traveled to Sudan after Operation Infinite Reach and to Yugoslavia during the war. She's visited Syria and Iran and organized delegations to Lebanon. She traveled several times to Gaza, and that's just within a couple of months. Sarah Flounders also does something else. The International Action Center with, Brother Ramsey Clark, they have been a home to virtually every movement that needed the space, that needed the opportunity to project their issues. There's certainly never a demonstration we had where their facilities and their capability and their expert organizing talents have not been made available to the movements of all sorts, for Palestinian rights. This is a sister who fights in the most comprehensive internationalist way on liberation, and she does it with grace and dignity and consideration and humbleness. And it's really an honor to know somebody who has dedicated every day of her life to the struggle for peace and justice, egalitarianism, and does it with such
beauty and delight, Sarah Flounders.
I don't think I met her. I want to talk about this getting our political prisoners on the national agenda. Not easy. And I think the most important step is having a perspective. It's so important for long-term activists who are in it for the long haul to know what we're up against. And Bob just made some great proposals on the work. But when I say perspective, I think everyone who does this work has to know deep in their bones that the prisons are the crime. The prisons are the crime. The prisons, the courts, the prosecutors, the cops, the whole damn system is a crime. A violent, protracted, racist crime against humanity. That is a truth. A crime against humanity on every level. Millions in prison for the crime of being poor, or black, or Muslim, or Native, or Latino. So many in prison for being disabled, not understanding an order, a demand. And there are millions more on probation, parole, all kinds of detention. And with criminal records, that's its own sentence, its own life sentence. And then, as we address tonight, so many thousands who are jailed for fighting this racist system, who've been locked away for years and decades. The only solution, and this we always have to know while we fight, the only solution is to tear the prisons down. That's the only solution. And the recognition that they're concentration camps and that the real criminals in this society never serve a day. Those who are really responsible for mass murder and hunger. It's a dying system, it's rotten to the core, and that perspective can also keep us fighting. Because when you expect justice from a system incapable of justice, you'll burn yourself out. There's no justice. There's no justice. On occasion, we can get a limited release. It's not justice that even one person was framed up and jailed, held in isolation, decades. Now, sometimes the sheer frustration of dealing with these criminal institutions and racist guards and arrogant judges can turn us against each other in frustration. This is true for anyone who's worked as a defense lawyer, who's worked in a defense committee, and certainly for those behind bars. The sheer frustration of not being able to get a response from a prison system can, in a rage, we fight each other. This happens. Not that there aren't real political questions, not that the issues aren't real. And it's also where perspective can help keep us together and build real unity. Now, when Lynne came out of prison, even though Ralph and Sister Betty here fought tooth and nail, stormed the heavens, Ralph, Lynne, they never said it was anything that they did right or that they had a solution. Lynne came out saying, remember all those left behind. How do we turn the work? And I think they're able to carry on the work, not say, well, we kind of deserve retirement now. Everyone would have understood that. But were able to keep going because they know this criminal injustice system is incapable of justice. Now, but back to the question, how we put this on the national agenda. I think the only way is to put it on every political agenda. Make this the question that the prisons are the crime part of every defense committee, and talk about what the prison conditions are. Now, and talk about it everywhere and link it to every struggle. There's a demonstration tomorrow. I hope everybody, most people. It's a rally against war and racism. Let's link the two. And the war at home and abroad. It's one war. It's one war. It's not a war over there and there's some kind of democracy here. We got to be like fighting that every moment. And the war is becoming more ruthless right here. So being part of a demonstration that's talking about the war there and the Black Lives Matter movement here and Puerto Rico, and talking about the whole island of Puerto Rico is still without electricity. Can you believe it? Potable water. Half the population doesn't have potable water. We're past 2 weeks. That is a crime. It's a crime because it's so solvable. The Pentagon brags that they have these things called base in a box, one container cargo that has generators and tarps and portable hospitals and all kinds of food and water and filtration systems. They brag about it. They have thousands and thousands of them in storage. They could put one down on every village in Puerto Rico. People know how to deal with it. They can't seem to find it on the map. They can find it real fast if they want to build a base. They just pull it right out of storage, plump it down. So linking that emergency, immediate aid for Puerto Rico, not for a war in Korea and keeping up the war in Afghanistan, and bringing home all the prisoners of war right here. See, linking that together is important. Keeping it on the agenda. Now, I want to say something that really strikes me about the Black Lives Matter movement. These past 2 years, throughout the whole country, they forced the issue to every cop killing, every racist cop. There were thousands and tens of thousands of people in the street. I want to salute the youth. Last night in St. Louis, they blocked the highway, the interstate again, and got arrested for it. How about Colin Kaepernick? Now, see, a year and his career to take a knee against racist police murders and push it long enough. Every week, there it was on television, and suddenly every sports, not only football, basketball, finally breakthrough yesterday, baseball. So putting it on the agenda, that is what has happened. And how about the youth who tore down the Confederate statue in Durham? They said, vote about it. They said, we already did that. Didn't do anything. You gotta force the issue. Take the action. It's the same thing at Standing Rock. It could go to the courts from now till, decades. Take the action. Force the issue. Put it on the agenda. And we have to, it's true, we need broad-based unity. But sometimes you gotta force the issue. And you got to salute the fighters who are forcing the issue. Personally, I think it's the only way forward. We need a national campaign. We need a strong campaign. But then we got to ensure that that campaign is on the agenda in every possible meeting. It's both those doing the work and insisting all over the country that all different groups support that work. And running through it all the time, we're talking about the individual prisoners, these heroic warriors, and we're also talking about the prisons are a crime. They are a crime of a racist, rotten, decaying system. There are ways of doing this, even pictures and names at every event. We can think there's hardly a demonstration where Mumia isn't there, and so often Leonard, yes. And the Move 9. Yes. And we have to make that real with the other prisoners. So many of them. We have to make their faces known, their names, and push it forward. Don't say, oh, well, I'm carrying another sign. No, I'm carrying this sign, this action. All right, I'm going to leave it with that, but I think for everyone here, if you're here tonight and you actually have been sitting here all this time, you already know these things about the prisons and the crimes, and it is what's given you perspective over a long, long time. So tear it down. Tear them all down. No justice, no peace, free them all.
Thank you, Sam.
Just want to give us 1 second. This is say their name. Say their name, because we didn't mention every name. Come on, say the name of somebody, a political prisoner. Who are we going to free?
Joy Powell.
Say that aloud.
Joy Powell.
Say the name. 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 And what are we going to do? We're going to free them all. What are we going to do? Free them all. Now, what do I say about the next person? Oh, my God. You know, also, you're not in Wikipedia, sorry, brother. But, you know, Betty, what did you do here? You gave me 5 pages. And wait a minute, political prisoner? Ralph was sentenced to Rikers because he was incarcerated for street fighting? Ralph was incarcerated for street fighting against the tactical police force while organizing during the human rights struggle of the 60s. While in Riker, he organized the first and only successful prison takeover in 1969. But, you know, you got a picture to show. Yeah, you know, so does the FBI. She took it from the police. I can't even begin to think, and I have to say, Ralph pointed perhaps with all the things that he's done about labor rights and in the community control movements and the school system and within the work on the Lower East Side and all these things. I mean, that's all remarkable. But I keep thinking when it was like between 95 and 100 degrees and Ralph was marching in Washington, D.C. to free Lynne Stewart. But Lynne Stewart and she would be the first one who says it, as was Ralph. It was about freeing an individual, but it was about freeing all the political prisoners. It always was. That's what Lynne stood for. That's what Ralph stood for. And and Lynne really did give her life. As I said, she was martyred for the cause, and she was unflinching. And there's Ralph marching around in the sun. And people came to join him. You know, Dick Gregory came to join him, a lot of our other comrades. But Ralph was there, undaunted, whether anyone was there or not, whether it was raining, etc. And Ralph has, for 50 years at least, really committed to the most militant expression of freeing the people and not relenting in freeing the leaders who did what? They were embedded in the communities. They were the ones who were decolonizing our minds. They were the ones who were working around the schools. They were the ones who were working around dislocation. They were the ones who were working around the drug abuse and setting up alternative programs and all these things. And we didn't say Matula Shakur, among others. So Ralph has been there, and Ralph is one of the people who puts himself out, certainly Sister Betty, but Ralph Pointer has always put himself out to his own physical detriment at times to say their names and uplift the leaders of our movements who must be returned to the communities that they committed their lives to. Ralph Pointer, you're a very special fellow, and you are uncompromising and unflinching in your militance. Happy birthday, Sister Lynne Stewart. Ralph, we honor you. We honor you.
Thank you, Mimi. And thank you. And as I said over and over again, when Lynne was released from, and let's get our language clear, the death camps, because that's what our political prisoners are in. They're in death camps and death by denial of medical attention. Remember that, the death camps. Now, it wasn't so long ago that I was at a meeting similar to this, and someone said, Ralph, talk about what Lynne Stewart is all about. And I says, that's very easy, because Lynne Stewart was about every movement that was around even before she became of age. She was that kind of person who could not stand injustice, and before we learned the language of fighting injustice, she fought injustice. The blind sheikh taught us some of the language of fighting. And he said, first, you feel it in your heart. Second, you speak out against it. And third, you raise a fist against it. And that's what we're about. You, all of you here, spending a Friday night, a beautiful Friday night. And it's a beautiful theater, but there are other things that you might be doing. But we have to be about all of the movements that we come in contact with all of the time. And when you get tired, and we do get tired, and I remember once speaking to Lynne, and I says, Lynne, it's 20 years now. I'm working 2 jobs, and I never have a penny. And Lynne says, oh, that's okay, I got an answer. And I says, well, what's the answer? And she says, we'll ask one of the political prisoners to come out and take your 2 jobs, and you go to jail. That cleared it up. And so, with that type of prodding behind me, and we prodded each other about all of the movements. And if I were to begin to name the people who kept us going, and Lynn would say, they are the wind under my wings. We couldn't, we would be nowhere without you. And like I just look and I see all of you here, and at every moment of our struggle, every moment of our lives, every moment of being in the movement is because of you. And so I will go back to my beginnings in this movement after I met Queen Mother Moore. And she said to me, if you're going to be in this line of work that is struggling and working for the liberation of the people, your only reward will be the people you are struggling with. And I find it is a magnificent reward. No matter what happens, as Lynn would say, no matter what happens, I'm aware of the people out there doing the struggling that I wish I could be out there struggling with them and never felt sorry for ourselves. So as I look around, I would begin saying the names, and I would be here all night long. And so I'm not going to say the names. I'm going to say stick around. We have a few videos. We've overcome the technical difficulty, and we're gonna have a little bit of Lynn with her own words. And we had hoped to have things from 1992 and 93. We couldn't get that done, but we're going to have a short of the documentary that's been going on for 15 years as to what Lynn is about, and her own words are far better than any words I could think of. And so without taking your time, Ernesto, do your thing.
I've been asked the question if I am.
I have always been at home with technical difficulties. And so this evening, we are not going to see the chaser or the beginning of the documentary that we so look forward to finishing. We are, along with asking people to contribute for political prisoners, we're asking people who feel so inclined to make a contribution to make this documentary available. It is a story worth telling. The work on this documentary has gone on for 15 years. There's enough, more than enough in it for a mini-series. And once you begin to look at the life of Lynn, you're looking at the life of a community. She reflects a lot of communities. She spent every year of her life past 21 on the Lower East Side. She died or she passed at 78. And so you get a picture of what the Lower East Side is. You get a picture of the 60s. You get a picture of the struggle for justice that has been going on in this country for a long time. And some of her final words, a few of her final words were, "Don't feel sorry for me. I have been the beneficiary of white skin privilege and everything that America offers out of that. I'm just trying to put a little bit back. And so many people have paid such a high price to bring America to this level that we are at, that she accepts the punishment that she had to try to move it a little further. And so with that said, Lynne accepted the punishment. No, she didn't. She fought against the punishment. And there were so many who fought alongside of her. And I would like Betty to say a word or two about her struggle supporting Lynne.
It's just it's very simple. As Lynne was transitioning, one of the things she said to Ralph, when the man comes, who you gonna call? Okay. And she just started naming names as she was going. And this is what I say to you. You got no choice. You're stuck with me. Because we're both in this boat, and we're gonna sink or we're going to be free together. So, I can forgive you, for some of your shortcomings, if you can forgive me for some of mine, and let's get this thing together. We don't own the political prisoners. They had paid their dues to us. They owe us nothing. We owe them everything. Look at the Black Panther 10 points, and then read the Civil Rights Act of 1965, and tell me who owes who. And the first thing the fascists did when they started coming back into power because we went to sleep, they started pushing back against those 10 points. They never did let us have community control of education, but women got some rights. Several ethnic groups got their rights, and it was all, as the civil rights people say, on the wings of the civil rights movement. And the real wings of the civil rights movement was the BLA, the Black Panthers, and those anarchists. My God, those anarchists. And let's not forget all of those revolutions where people like Gilbert and Jan Laman and there's so many of them that I could name. And that's what this is about. We can put that back on the agenda, and now is the time. Every time Trump opens his mouth, we've got an opportunity to say a political prisoner tried to solve that problem. Okay? So that's all I wanted to say to you. We've been asked to start using excerpts of the documentary, and we've been invited to different venues, and we will be using the documentary to educate people about the 60s, and different members of the family, including Ralph and our usual band of usual suspects, are going to join us, whether they know it or not. And one of the things I know is they always come through for us. So please keep the documentary first and foremost in your minds. We will be putting out excerpts of it. We will be teaching the community about their history so that they know they've had some victories. And basically, when you talk about a political prisoner, if you look at their life and you look at the laws, there were victories. And that's why they're pushing back. So I want to turn the mic back over. But before that, I want to see if Dolores is still here. Dolores Cox. We could never function without her. I just want you to know that. And the Justice and Unity people, I won't say BAI, they're in the house. We want to say thank you. The Mamiya people are in the house. And Danny McGowan. And of course, the Independistas are in the house. And it's never been right to have a movement without them. And the whole Stewart Pointer family was here tonight. They're stepping to the front because they want to get Jan Laman out. You know, he went into the hole because he sent condolences to Lynne. Did you know that? He's been in the hole ever since for sending, yes, sympathy to the family. March 21st. So we got to get him out. And you know they tried to beat Herman Bell to death. So we've got to step to the plate. Herman Bell, 69 years old, was accused of slapping 5 correction officers. It's interesting though, his family was supposed to be able to visit him for the first time in 2.5 years, and all of a sudden he slaps them, and he never had an infraction in 20 years. And everybody who believes that, raise your hand. So we've got to get him out. And I thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. There's another person here who loved Lynne absolutely to death, and that's Ellen. I don't know if Ellen is still here. She never missed a day sending a card to Lynne. Never once. And I don't see her because my eyes are not okay, but I didn't want to stop that. And the person that has this talent is right here. His name is Russell Dale, and Ralph Shulman, they never stopped in terms of producing tapes about Lynne the whole time she was away. So now we find out he's a musician as well. And his wife, every flyer we put out, besides Sarah, the technological help that she gave us was just unbelievable. So there's so many of you I owe. Everybody that was on that panel is a family member as far as I'm concerned. And we want to say thank you to you. So don't worry about this. You know this is an old theater, but we felt we had to launch our, what shall we call it, Ralph? Our campaign, thank you. We're launching this campaign about this documentary. They tried to show it in Canada, and the person was threatened with imprisonment. They would not even let her show it privately. Okay, so I think Ralph can bring you up to date on that. And with that, we've got to get out of here, but we want to say thank you.
Thank you.
And do support this documentary. And nobody has funded it. We have funded it. And so if we continue to fund it, we will have a powerful piece of, okay, you kept me from going to jail. What is that, 1,000? 145, and people have put checks and money in my pocket, and I haven't checked it out yet. And so we've gone beyond that. So we're going to cover our expenses. But more than that, we're going to get this video out where people can see, the people who don't know, they can see that there are those of us still fighting for liberation.
Put our money back in. We're going to increase the amount to the anarchists and to Jericho. We'll just increase the amount that goes to them. All right, so thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks and good night.